Hello, everyone, and welcome to the IPython Jupyter developer meeting for Tuesday, January 20th. Just a reminder to everyone that we have moved our regular meeting from Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific to Tuesdays at that same time. We still have some topical meetings on Thursdays, but our regular reliable meeting is on Tuesdays from now on. And with that said, let's dive into the agenda.
Okay, so I'll take the first one. So when you create a modal dialog with our dialog wrapper, if you pass a string to the body key, it will be inserted as HTML, which means that if there is a script tag or any other HTML entities, it can pop up in the dialog which executes JavaScript. I came up with that by on the Google Drive integration, where error message from the server directly arrived and were displayed not correctly. So I think that by default, when you pass a string to body on doing modal, it should be sanitized, or at least use jQuery text instead of HTML method. We pretty much agree that we want a way not to sanitize if it's text. I think the last things we are not totally agree with is whether or not we should, if what is passed is a DOM element, try to sanitize it also or not.
Yeah, I don't think we should, ever.
You don't think we should do whatever?
If you give it HTML, the dialog code should assume that HTML is correct.
And by HTML, do you mean a string or a DOM?
No, I mean a DOM, like a jQuery DOM.
Okay. So do we use this body argument to our modal wrapper?
Yes, this is the body argument to the modal wrapper.
Okay, so this is the main, and what do we typically pass?
For some short messages, we pass a string. And in those cases, we always expect, like when we pass, in looking at the code we have, when we pass a string, we expect it to be text. So if there's like a greater than symbol, it will be handled incorrectly.
Okay.
And when we pass it HTML, it's HTML. It shouldn't be modified at all or sanitized or anything.
Okay. And where's I'm trying to understand, how could user content target?
If any extension use dialog, using body is by default right now unsafe. And you could pass it a string, believing it will behave like a string, but it's actually HTML. So my take on that is that by default, it should be secure when it's text, so escaping and all the thing. If you pass it a DOM element, then you know you're giving it HTML, so it might contain script, and it's to the library author to do whatever is needed for it to work. And if you want to pass it text and behave like HTML, you have to set the sanitized equal false flag explicitly. I don't see any case where people want to pass HTML that we want to sanitize.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be inclined to do it based on type.
Yeah, honestly, I don't feel too strongly about it. I think doing it based on type is pretty reasonable. I mean, I think the only question that leaves is, if you get a string, do you treat it as text or as HTML text?
Right now it's HTML, and with the PR it will be text unless you add a flag.
And we've never passed it a string with HTML tags in it. We've only passed it text that we expect to be plain text. So if there's any HTML entities in, say, a file name, I think we built some strings with a file name in them, they can be handled raw.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
I think I agree. John was one of the last one who had comments. Maybe you want to.
Yeah. Any angle on this, John?
No, I'm okay with that. I just figured it would be better to be explicit than implicit. Like it was more clear. But I mean, it's not. I don't have like, you know me. I don't have a really strong opinion, so it's okay. Either way.
One of the problems, if we sanitize by default HTML, it will almost never work because people can bind events, and we need to stringify the HTML and then make it into HTML for the sanitizing library to work. So I'm not sure it is worth trying to really sanitize already constructed DOM element, because if someone already have a DOM element, then they already have access to the whole page and can directly inject whatever. Yeah. So if we get a DOM element, I mean, we're already sanitizing too late.
Yeah, and I think in general the principle that when we're building HTML, we should build it safely. So when we're handing HTML around, we should treat the code that put the HTML together as the one responsible for escaping things from untrusted sources and stuff like that.
And one of the tricky things I learned during this PR is that append of jQuery behave like HTML when you give it a string, which I don't like, but there is not much we can do.
Sorry, say that again?
If you use a DOM element .append, it behaves like setting inner HTML.
Yeah.
I would believe it would behave like text, but it does not.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, we have little hacks for dealing with that in various places where you want to append text, and we basically add an extra element and then put text.
Yeah, but I mean that's if we do a security audit, that's probably something we want to review. Be sure that we don't use append with text which is user dependent. Yeah, that we always wrap it in a DOM element with a text method.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can move on.
Okay.
Your PR basically as is should be good to go.
Okay. Can you put a note in the agenda there, Matthias, about what we decided? So the next is 7454, the idea of adding a project name to the kernel spec. And then this is yours. You want to describe what we have going on?
Yeah, so the issue is it's addressing some of the issues of we want all our examples and stuff to be able to open on both Python 2 and Python 3.
Yeah.
And there's the fact that I have an Anaconda kernel, I have a PyPy kernel, and all the notebooks I write with any of those kernels should be openable for anybody with any Python or any IPython kernel. So what this does is add a key to every IPython kernel that's always the same. So when doing kernel lookup, it's kind of a two-stage thing that normally we do. Do I have a kernel with the exact same name, which is Python 2 or Python 3, or Python 3 debug or PyPy, or all my various names? And then if so, use that, and if not, die horribly. That's what we do in master.
Yeah.
This PR it says, okay, I don't have an exact match. Let me go through my kernels and see if I have any with a where this project name key matches, and then open with that. And secondarily, the PR also adds I don't have an appropriate kernel. Here's a dialog. Pick a kernel.
Yeah, I mean, I think trying to guess which kernel should be used is there's just a lot of ways that can end up not quite what the user wanted, and I think part of my concern there is that if I don't know, guessing could have side effects for users that they're not aware of. Like they could be using a kernel they think they're a different kernel than they think they were, and I mean I could imagine a user.
I mean, this only has any effect in the case where they would have no kernel at all, where the alternative is no kernel. So that really the choices are something like this, where there's a key indicating compatibility, or every Python 2 user, when they try to open an example notebook from IPython, they get, sorry, I don't have an appropriate kernel. Would you like to use the one and only kernel you have?
I guess our example can be rewritten at its install time so that we are sure that they are matching the installed kernel. I mean,
well, but I agree we may want to do that. What was that, Thomas?
We don't install our examples, do we? They're not part of the install process?
No, not today. Yeah.
So you mean people that don't know?
Yeah, you come from master. Or
I mean, so let's say I have I mean, I guess there's two cases, right? When you don't have the actual kernel installed that notebook is linked to.
Mm-hmm.
The first case is where you have a compatible kernel.
And remember, it's not the same kernel. It's that unique folder name, which for me might be, Anaconda with NumPy 1.9.
Yeah, but they either.
The fact that we're telling people to use kernel specs for environments, such lambs and conjure environments, and other such things means that these notebooks are liable to get saved with all kinds of names in that.
And we're
field.
telling people to do that.
No, absolutely, and I think we should embrace that. My only point is that if a user has multiple kernels, so one, if the user, there's a decision tree here. So the first is that let's assume the user doesn't have that precise kernel installed on their current system. If they do, it'll just be used, right? That's not under.
Right.
Okay, so they don't have that specific kernel, and then there's one of two possibilities under that. One is that they have another kernel that is compatible. I'll just use the word compatible, right?
Sure.
It may be Python 3 rather than Python 2. It may be a different env. The other option is that they have no compatible kernel.
Mm-hmm.
But this is already, this is already not a strict binary thing. I mean, it's perfectly possible to write a Python 3 notebook that won't run on Python 2. We're just committing that our examples will run on both for the time being.
Yeah, and we're also specifically choosing not to provide, at least at this point, specifically choosing to not provide the ability to say this should run on a Python kernel where Python's greater than 3.3 or something.
No, absolutely.
We are not providing that functionality.
And there's also other issues aside from the language question. It could be that notebook uses scikit-learn, and the kernel they have available to replace the other one doesn't have scikit-learn installed. So
yeah, we're specifically choosing to not address that.
No, obviously. And I guess my point is, because of all that complexity, let's not ever guess.
Okay, so you do realize that's saying that most IPython users should get a warning, a modal dialog warning, if they open an IPython example.
I mean, I wouldn't. I guess I wouldn't. Well, I wouldn't quite call it a warning. I would say we just pull up a dialog that says this kernel.
I couldn't find a kernel that works.
I couldn't find a kernel. Which one do you want to use? Yeah. But I just don't. I'm not at all convinced that.
And anybody who creates a custom environment, when they save a notebook and give it to someone else.
Yeah, they need to make sure to manually edit their notebook metadata as in a copy because they want to open it in their kernel. They need to manually edit the metadata after making a copy and before sending it to someone else so that they'll be able to open it.
Yeah. I mean, the problem with the project idea is that if there are two alternate kernels that implement that project name, you're back into the same old thing where you have to ask them which they want to install. And so it's not clear that
unless there is a global registry where you can ask for a global ID and that's a notebook can query, there is no way to solve that. I would prefer also to ask user every time. And that's something we will have to deal with. We shouldn't bake things into the message spec just because of IPython case, because it's becoming Jupyter.
But this isn't just because.
I mean, no other languages are creating different kernels by default for different versions because there aren't other languages there aren't other languages in the pathological simultaneously maintained incompatible versions.
No, but
I mean, if I don't know the Haskell notebook and load it, it will tell me that there is no Haskell kernel.
It'll tell you what?
If I don't know the Haskell notebook and try to run it, it will tell me, hey, I don't have an Haskell kernel. So it's not just us, it's everybody that download an example they don't have the kernel for. And IPython.
But the problem is that really, we shouldn't have Python 2 and Python 3 as kernels. We should just have Python. Right?
Why?
Because they're not different languages. It's one language.
They are. Many people will tell you that they are different languages.
Okay, then iJulia 0.3 is also a different language from Julia 0.4. It's different from Julia 0.2. And they should put the version number in the kernel name for everything. And so if I write a notebook with Julia 0.3, and then you open it with 0.4, you should say, I have no kernel for that.
The issue is that we're saying, like, this set of example notebooks, and this is something that other people may well want to say. We want to say, these will all work on Python 2 and Python 3.
What about? I think actually there's an abstraction question here, and that is what is a kernel? Is kernel a language? Is it a project? Is it an env? Is it a particular combination of libraries for a particular, like there's. And we right now have one key to encode all of those different.
Well, I mean, our rough idea was that a kernel corresponds to a language, but as soon as we started creating them and using them, we realized that, unless we want to address the environment question in some generic way, then a kernel also will need to correspond to an environment, at least for some people, and so because Python is in the middle of a transition, the notion of a kernel for Python corresponds to a language plus the major version of a language.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's also important to keep in mind that Anaconda is going to soon have full support for R, and so I'm guessing that people are going to start to use environments to encapsulate different combinations of R packages and things like that as well. So I mean, it's definitely an abstraction.
The reason I did want to get into environment management was that, it's environment management is not just Python and virtual envs. It's not.
No, I think, I mean, honestly, I think even though we started out with thinking of a kernel as a language, I do think realistically, right now we're using it more as an env level abstraction that includes the particular install of that language, a certain set of libraries, all of it.
Why
Why
not
no, I think for a lot of people the kernel will primarily be corresponding to languages, because we're not directly supporting environments. You know, if you want to have a kernel per environment, you have to go and set that up manually.
So two things. One, I don't think we could solve that for 3.0, and if we add something, we will have difficulties to remove it. So I would push the decision to later. And we could do something which is like versioning, like dotted separated string, where like maybe 3 parts where the major version is everything which is compatible, and then every time you add a dot, it's in more detail. So it's, for example, Pythons and versions and detail about the environment, like a hash of what is installed or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you cannot get, if you get an exact match, then it's fine. But if you don't get the last patch version, you can get back to minor version and warn that it might be incompatible. And otherwise, you just look up what corresponds to the major version.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Originally we had language info in the kernel spec. Then we kind of realized there was more language info than we expected. So we moved that to the kernel info reply. Another option is to put the language and version back in, just the language and its version, back into the kernel spec where it began, and then use that and say, open a Python kernel, open any Python kernel.
Yeah, I think if we're going to try and select a kernel other than the name that's encoded in the notebook, I think the only thing that makes sense is to have like a language name field that would just be something like Python.
Because I really don't think that the Jupyter kernel spec should distinguish between Python 3 and Python 2.
I think it should. For me, there are different languages. The syntax is really close, but for many people, it's different.
Well, it's really close, and I mean, all the Python we write is syntactically valid on both. So, I mean, as far as we're concerned, as far as the Python we write, they're the same language.
You can write programs that run on Fortran and Camel at the same time. I mean,
yes, but the difference is the standard practice in Python is to write code that works on both and not treat them differently.
And it was also perfectly possible to write like Python 2.2 programs that don't run on Python 2.7, because if you go and find like the very first version of IPython, it doesn't run on Python 2.7 because it uses with as a variable name, and with became a keyword. So
yeah, so we should include, but yeah, by that logic we should include, and I mean Python 3.3 and Python 3.4 aren't syntactically the same, so we should include the minor version too.
Yeah. So
by the same logic.
Some questions. So right now we use the language name and language version for syntax highlighting things.
Yeah.
And what other information about the language is in the language information?
So there's the language name, right? Language name, language version.
Code mirror mode, pigments, lexer, MIME type, file extension.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's that type of stuff. I do think Matthias brought up a good point about a couple of things in terms of stability. And one is that we're not quite sure how people are going to use all of this exactly. And the cost of making some types of changes in our next release could be very high. Like if we start to use more specific information now and decide, oh my gosh, that's causing problems, let's remove it, that could be difficult. I think regardless of the details, because of those things, I'd be in favor of picking the simplest possible thing for now that will have the least likely, even if it's less capable, that it's least likely to break in the future as we figure out how this is exactly going to be used. And
if a drop-down is too long to select kernel, we can just, like, I think it was Tim Clem that proposed that, to have just a big button with a few kernel we have, and you just click on the kernel with the logo. If you have kernels installed, you can even click quickly on the logo.
Yeah.
So a special dialog, which is just not...
So we are seriously going to
say that all Python 2 users should get a dialog saying they can't open every notebook we ever create.
Well, here's another idea to address that. What if we think about it backwards, and in the metadata field in the notebook that specifies which kernel it was run under, we start to track that as a list of kernels that it has worked under. So that if the first time, yes, it may, well, in one, we can ship all of our example notebooks with that list being Python 2, Python 3. And this way, as someone opens a notebook in different kernels, that notebook will automatically just go through the list trying the different kernels. And
how do you add and remove things from the list?
I mean, I think initially my thought would be the user interface is that when a notebook opens and there's not a kernel for it, that they get the drop-down menu, and that's used to append at the end of that list.
If we accidentally click R or something.
This means that the list will grow indefinitely and never be killed.
And potentially include entries that don't actually work.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think about how.
So then one key that doesn't populate automatically, and that people could manually add things to this key in the metadata that we tried.
Yeah, actually, we could say
people have different environments. It records every environment name that anyone who's opened that notebook has used with it.
Yeah. So what if we say that we won't have a UI in this release that adds or removes kernels from that list in the notebook metadata, but we basically make it so that if we get a notebook where that's a list, that we run through and try the kernels in that list.
I would never add to it, but you can manually write this list.
Yeah, so we could ship our IPython examples, and it would just work. And so we would tackle...
as long as nobody uses an N.
Well, and I think they can still change kernels later. I mean,
that's why I think the project name that all IPython kernels should be assumed at least basically compatible.
I think I would do it based on language name rather than project name.
Yeah, that's fine too. I proposed that as well in the in the PR, and it would have the same characteristics. That it would just work everywhere. There's just no manual list. It's because. So what you described is every time I open a notebook with an IPython kernel, it gets implicitly trusted or gets implicitly supported by that notebook. But if I just open it with all IPython kernels, that's equivalent to saying this is an IPython kernel. Just with one value instead of n.
Yeah. So question. So, Thomas, you were thinking maybe about us using the language name field in the language info reply, and basically
it would have to be in the kernel spec.
Yeah, you would have to put a copy of the language name in the kernel spec. But I mean, just if the kernel spec says Python, R, Julia, whatever,
and
that
then
seems the most straightforward way to picking something that's likely to be compatible.
Yes, and if there are, okay, I like that idea, but let's think through some of this. So if there are no kernels that satisfy that language requirement,
Mhm.
what would we do?
Dialogue.
Yeah.
Okay, and then allow them to just edit the notebook without running code?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's one kernel installed, then it's obvious. We just use it.
Mhm.
And if there are multiple, do we give them a drop down of those that satisfy it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Assuming there isn't one that exactly matches the name, because if there is, obviously you can start that.
Exactly matches the name, or exactly
I mean-
matches the name or the name and version.
Exactly matches the kernel name.
Yeah, I think we should ignore the version for this if we do it.
Should we ignore the language name too? So, okay, so I have a notebook that says I am for, right, because right now this is what our notebooks say. Our notebooks currently have the information. I am a notebook run on Python 3.4.2. And then I have a kernel that says I am Python 3.4.2. And I have another kernel that says I am Python 2.7, whatever.
Yep.
Do we say...
The kernels don't say that level of specificity.
I mean,
It says, like, this is a Python 2 kernel.
Yeah,
I mean,
but that's the kernel name. That kernel name doesn't have version information in it. That kernel name just...
It does. It has 2 or 3.
well, but
as far as IPython is concerned, it has no version information in it. It is a dumb string that might as well be any text.
Yeah, we need to treat it as a UUID.
Yeah. And so when we're adding the language information back to the kernel spec, then I'm looking at 2 kernels. One that's Python 3.4.2, one that's Python 2.7.6. And I should ask, if even though all the information we consider is perfectly identical, we should ask which Python kernel to use?
If the kernel name matches, if the notebook says this is a Python 3 notebook, with the kernel name.
No, kernel name myPython 3 end.
Yes.
Language info.
Yeah. In that case, if you don't have a kernel matching the exact name, then it would ask.
Okay, even though all the language information matches exactly.
Yeah, I don't.
In exactly one case.
I think that's too much guessy.
Okay.
Yeah, but I like this.
I'm fine with that. I totally disagree, but.
Okay. So you're. So Min, I want to understand exactly. So you're saying, if
I still think currently the preferable case is that if you have any IPython kernel, or Python kernel for that matter, if you have one, it will open with it.
But I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
And if you have 2 and one matches exactly, it should just open that too.
But the notebook doesn't save all of the language information to be able to identify.
Yes, it does.
Oh, does it?
Yes. It just comes from the kernel info reply, not from the kernel spec. So right now that information is not stored in the kernel spec, but we're talking about adding it to the kernel spec. In which case, all the language and version would be present on both sides, and you can compare them and see that they're equal.
Okay. I'm sorry. I missed that subtle point. Okay, so you're saying the proposal is to add the language name and the language version back to the kernel spec.
But then we get into lots of questions about, what level of specificity do you want? If I have a Python 3.4.1 kernel installed and the notebook says 3.4.2.
Yeah. So honestly, what I would do.
That ought to match too. I mean,
I agree.
That's close enough.
So I would do, rather than prompting for any Python kernel, I would basically pick the nearest one. I think that's a better experience.
But then that doesn't help with environments and things where you're going to have multiple. I think just having the language name deals, to my mind, with the two most common failure modes that we've identified with the current system. The first of which is we want our own examples to open in Python 2 or Python 3, whatever the user has available, without them having to do anything special. And if someone saves the notebook in an environment, it shouldn't completely fall over for anyone who doesn't have the same environment name.
Yeah, it covers those two. I do think my concern is that in more, let's say I have, Python 3.4 with a certain set of libraries installed, and 3.4.1 with the wrong set of libraries installed, and it picks the most recent one, which is 3.4.1, but I really wanted 3.4. It's that type of guessing that I just think we're going to get it wrong enough that let's not for now try that guessing.
Yeah, and just prompt the user.
So.
Yeah, never make any choices. If there's any choice to be made, the user makes it.
Plus, if we start encoding version information in the kernel spec, if you go into an environment and do conda update Python, that then needs to.
Okay, so we're just adding the language key. I missed that. We're just adding the language key, not the language inversion, to the kernel spec.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Yes, that's basically taking my project name that's IPython and making it language name that's Python.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the only difference from my proposal is that rather than picking a match, we pick a match if there's only one. Otherwise, we draw a dialog with the match list.
Yeah.
If there is only one match, or if there is only one kernel.
Yeah.
Only one kernel that doesn't match. So you have a Python notebook. Or the basic case of I have IPython, I only have a Python kernel, and I open a Haskell notebook. It shouldn't show you a dialog saying I couldn't find a Haskell kernel.
I'm lost.
So you said if there's no match, we open with only. If there's no match but only one kernel, we use it. So that means if you open.
No, I mean do we pick automatically if there is only one match, or do we pick automatically if there is only one kernel?
Only one match. Only one match.
Yeah, because if it's something completely different, like a Haskell notebook, then it shouldn't try to start a Python kernel for it at all.
I think that's reasonable.
So I'm just taking notes so we have it. So here's the description. Add a duplicate of language name to the kernel spec. First, look for the kernel with the right kernel name. Then look at the language name in the kernel spec. If there's one match, just use it. And if there's multiple matches, prompt the user with the matches. Is there any other?
And the last is if no match, prompt the user with everything.
If no match, prompt.
Yes, and that should include preferably some kind of option for no, none of these are right. Just let me look at the notebook without a kernel.
Yeah, and that's already in the PR, I think.
Right.
Or it might be in a local not yet pushed commit, but it's already. The button exists somewhere.
No, this is great. I'm really happy with this. I think it satisfies those two failure modes.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, the other question though, and that is, do we want to add a separate project name attribute to the kernel spec to cover the case of different projects implementing that language? And this would be just for the user to see for now, or do we just leave it out for now and say
I
think leave it out for now.
I would leave it out, yeah.
Don't yet, well, apart from the simple kernel Python example, we don't really have many cases of different projects implementing kernels for the same languages. And I don't think there's going to be. I'm sure a few of them will pop up, but I don't think that's likely to become a big thing.
Okay, fantastic. I think that sounds great. All right, menu bar actions. John, do you want to walk us through that?
I think it's Mint that added that.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
not.
fine.
I'm sorry. It's okay.
Yeah.
Different menu actions. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matthias started a PR rewriting the menu bar to use a declarative structure and associate every menu item with an action rather than custom handlers. And I started picking it up because Matthias was busy with visa stuff.
Oh, okay.
And then I stopped doing that.
I think it's fine to push to 4.0.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a lot of relatively tedious. Take all these little closure functions and make them actions and then call them from actions. And we don't have a good framework for testing, like click every button and make sure they do everything. So I would be surprised to be able to do it without introducing a whole bunch of bugs in the menu buttons.
And it also involves picking the action names, which is
So
it's API design.
Yeah, so I think it's a fine thing to do, but I would.
The action names mostly already exist because they are binded to keyboard shortcuts.
Well, the vast majority of things in the menu bar do not have keyboard shortcuts. So that's what I was actually surprised when I realized, this doesn't have a shortcut. Most things in the menu don't have keyboard shortcuts. The edit menu, I think, is the main one that does.
Okay. No, I'm fine.
I just wanted to have a public decision on whether to punt or not.
So is there any? So the big change from the user experience is that this starts to put in the keyboard shortcuts in the menus, right?
Yeah, by associating with actions, it makes that possible.
And it makes the menu configurable for users. If a user wants extra custom actions their own, they can add it into the menu.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a huge usability improvement, but I mostly agree that this is not absolutely critical for 3.0.
I think we all agree about that. I mean, it's work in progress.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The one thing I still would like is that we go over any shortcut names that we have chosen already for keyboard shortcuts and come up with the uniform naming syntax. That pull request got merged so we could test it, but the idea was that we need to go back and because that will become our public API for keyboard customization, and I want to make sure those names are.
We can still say it's private. It's still private, and once we have the menus that use this, we can decide on the name of all actions because right now we don't know all the actions that exist. And once it exists, we will have a comprehensive list.
I'm fine with that as long as we all agree that we in our next release will break names of keyboard shortcuts freely. No compatibility. I mean, we will break names.
I think the names we have a comment that says that the names are provisional.
Okay. I mean, I would.
I think we can take a pass at it. I think that's fine.
Don't document them anywhere like we do with all of our JavaScript stuff.
Yeah.
Or
we have no public. Essentially, at this point, we have 0 public APIs in JavaScript.
Okay.
Every JavaScript function or method we have is provisional.
All right. I will send you guys all. I will send everyone a document that you can have signed in front of a notary stating that we can break these APIs for 4.0. And just kidding.
I'm okay with that.
Anyway, all actions are prefixed with IPython, and 4.0 will be Jupyter, so we will rename all IPython instance to Jupyter, so it will break.
All right, I'm convinced.
Yeah. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff breaking in 4.0. It's going to be rough. We'll do our best, but it's going to be interesting. Next one. Dashboard title. So
that could be our code name of 4.0 is break all the things.
Dashboard title. So Doug, we talk about the dashboard, but nowhere on the dashboard does it say dashboard. So Doug asked for dashboard to be somewhere visually present. we discussed a few things, putting it in the page title, putting it in the header. There's a PR that puts it in the page title. I'm not sure about any of them.
I think I'm probably leaning towards doing nothing.
Okay.
It's not a strong preference, and if someone has strong preferences, I probably could be convinced.
I'm doing nothing.
It just and part of it is that even though I'm not convinced that the word dashboard is something that every IPython user uses.
Yeah, I think Doug has an issue with talking about the dashboard with his students, and they don't know what the dashboard is because there's no indication that the dashboard is the dashboard. I'm not sure that we even, I don't know, it's also the tree view and the notebook list. And
Exactly. I mean, I think...
Yeah, I would be inclined to call it something like the file list or something, because it's, I think of a dashboard as something with, knobs and dials and things.
Yeah, well, there's the GitHub dashboard.
Yeah, I agree. Dashboard is probably not the best name now.
Which also doesn't have dashboard on it anywhere.
Yeah, like the
They've referred to it as that. GitHub has.
Yeah, I don't know, any objections to closing it and doing nothing?
I'm okay. I assume we will have objections from Doug.
Yeah, and I just think
we need to do user testing.
Yeah, find the dashboard.
Yeah, it's designing your user test.
Yeah, I think there are latent questions there. I think Doug has a valid point. I'm not convinced at all that we want to use that precious space in the tab for that text.
Uh-huh.
And I'm also, if we're going to make something official enough to put it on the...
We do refer to, so we've got events on dashboard. We've got less variables called dashboard. Apparently the tree application is called dashboard app.
I know we do, but I'm not sure it's the best name for users.
Okay.
I agree with Thomas that
we do in two places we show the user's dashboard, and that's on a link on the notebook page. It says open a new window with the dashboard view.
Yeah, I think some of our documentation may refer to it.
That's not the documentation. That's like the live notebook page. There's a link to the dashboard view. And also on the logout page, it says proceed to the dashboard. So we do refer to it in as the dashboard to the user in at least two places.
Yeah.
We refer to it in code a lot.
I'm not sure what the right name is,
Okay.
but I'm not convinced that that is the right name that we want to start to formalize more.
Okay. We could call it tree view since that's our notebook list, file list.
I think file list is better than tree view from a
that's
especially
from an actual human's perspective. That's probably true.
It's actually
from a computer science perspective, it doesn't display it as a tree.
Well, and it's the wrong kind of tree too.
And it's not just files; it's contents and services.
It's what you might call a dashboard.
Save me.
Overview page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thingy.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
I mean, maybe just colloquially, we can start to say the home page.
Well, doesn't and it's got a little house. So that's an indicator that it's home, right?
Yeah. So I don't want to make any decisions on that.
Okay.
All right.
Fair enough.
Left aligning versus justification. some people wanted this changed. I know some people don't.
Okay.
My take on it is merge the PR and live with it for a while, see if we like it or not.
Yeah, I will admit I'm the one that is an advocate of this.
Yeah, I guess the open question in the PR is, do we want to transition from left align to justify at one of the width transition boundaries?
You know,
Since that seems to be the whatever typographic convention is, justify when it's short, left align when it's long.
well,
For whatever short and long are.
no, I mean the other. So I have a link to a blog post about this, and the big thing is that browsers do a really horrible job with word spacing in justified text,
Yeah, because they don't hyphenate or anything.
and
Or they can't, actually.
and that gets worse as you make it narrower, and so you end up with lines that just look horrible from a typographical perspective as you get shorter lines.
Yep.
So I mean, I think, Thomas, your idea is reasonable. Like, there's enough time before we release that we can sort of see how we like it and make changes if we want. I mean, yeah.
And it's a pretty simple change.
Yeah, it's just changing a couple CSS variables.
Yeah. So we could change it back 30 seconds before we release.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I'll just do my custom CSS if I don't like it. Async horse.
John.
It was just waiting for me. Right when I got back to work, it was the first thing that.
So where did the horse meme come from?
I don't know. Thomas, did you start that?
The horse icon on GitHub and on GitHub a bunch, and at some point I dubbed it the async horse because there were so many async problems. So now it turns up whenever there's an async problem.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I've been waiting for this.
For what? The horse?
Yeah, I didn't understand what it was either.
Okay.
So, yeah. Do you know how solvable do you think this is in a reasonable amount of time, John?
So I actually called Brian last night to talk about this because. So okay, let me give a little background.
Mm-hmm.
So that the way the output widget works is you can use it as a context manager, right? And so when you want to print text, when you want output to go to an output widget, you do with my output widget : and then whatever code is inside there gets sent to that output widget. Now, what's happening behind the scenes is that when you enter that context manager, it sends a custom message over COM to the widget in the front end, which then registers that output area that's inside that output widget with the code cell. So the next time the code cell receives output over the standard message spec, it just redirects it to that widget instead of putting it in its own output area. So the problem the problem here is that once we change everything to promises, the messages coming over the COM are promised, and they are evaluated later, so they're not evaluated in the same order as the messages coming through the WebSocket, because promises, even if they're true, evaluate at the end of the thread execution.
Right, it's
So-
like a set timeout 0.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
Would it be possible to do the state change for the context manager on the Python side? I mean, I know we already have a capture output context manager. Could we build something based on the same kind of logic? So that-
Yeah, so yeah, I could do that. That's one solution. I could capture the output on the Python side. That's what you're saying, right? Basically, capture the output on the Python side.
That was how it worked already, actually, but
No. It uses the standard messages, so this doesn't alter the message spec, right? So standard out goes over the same standard out, regardless. So I could do that. I could change it so there's a new message, and the standard out is sent over that new message, maybe a custom widget message. That's one solution. The other solution is to propagate the promise logic through everything in the front end. And then I think I found a workaround, like a temporary fix that we could use for 3.0. And I have a fiddle. I've been playing with it right now. Let me post the link for you guys. So in the hackpad, here's a link to a fiddle that illustrates the problem. And you can just see, if you run that and look in the JS console, you'll notice that the messages, that the print statements aren't in the order that you would want. And I think as a workaround, I can just have an ordered promise inside the code cell itself. So if you look at the second JS fiddle, that kind of shows how it's not like a real solution, but it would work. Because I don't have access to the promise, the same promise that's being used for the com messages. So I would have to use a separate promise. So they would actually be unrelated. But it seems like in the evaluation, it gets evaluated correctly.
I have here two. Wait.
Yeah, they're identical. The two JS
Yeah, no, I was really puzzled.
Yeah, the JS fiddles are the same. Yeah.
Oh, what's the...
You probably didn't
Cross-having.
Hold on. I didn't save. Let me save the second one. That's probably what the problem is.
I had started to construct this internal narrative about how I've been coding so little I can't even look at two simple code examples and see the difference.
I feel like it would be simpler, rather than transmitting a state change to the JavaScript and having that redirect output in the JavaScript. I feel like it would be simpler to just use the Python context manager and redirect output on the Python side.
To a different message, a different widget message?
Yeah, to some com message targeted to that widget.
Yeah, that is a possible solution. I would hesitate to say that it was simple because it's a completely different solution. So I'm really just re-implementing the output widget. And at that point, do we want to just drop it?
The right way to do it, and I feel like my gut feeling is that there would be less pain with that route.
So would you wait until the context is done before sending any output?
No, you could just. Like the.
Oh, you're sending com messages. Yeah. Okay. So
yeah.
So. Yeah, I guess that would work, because then the com message would just basically have the content. You build the same content. It's going to need hooks all over IPython, I think. Or not all over, but in
you
two
really
places.
just need the hooks, the same hooks that the capture output context manager has for standard out, standard error, and the rich display system.
Yeah, because then you just send you build the exact same content. You build the exact same content, and then you send that as an element in a com message.
So here's
and that should ensure synchronicity, right? By making it a com message.
One thing I like about this idea is it removes some coupling between the cell object and widgets that is there in master right now, and that I like that decoupling of widgets from the rest of the notebook. The only other question is, would this make it more difficult for other languages to implement an output widget?
It makes it another message in the widget subset of the message spec. But it's identical to, it depends how capturable their output stuff is, right? Because I think our output stuff is easy to capture. I can't remember what we do. I think we just override like the IO pub socket with something so that any message over that actually goes to a capture location. I don't remember if we override the sys.standard out or if we override the IO pub socket.
It may make it marginally harder for other languages because rather than just saying start sending all output to this output widget, they have to implement, a way of capturing output on the kernel side and sending it somewhere else. But I suspect for the languages that will actually want to do this, like Julia, I suspect that's perfectly doable.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm. John, what's your design sense on this?
I think that's a great long-term solution. Just depending on when we want to release IPython, I don't know if you want me to re-implement that or if we should just pull the output widget or if we should try this workaround.
Yeah, so
that would work.
You like
Which I updated the link, by the way.
Okay, so you like the long-term plan, but it's more a question of what to do now for 3.0.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is, here's a question. How do you send this switch, this stateful switch, from the kernel to the front end? Is it in a message metadata field?
It's just a custom message, a custom widget message. It's just push, and then the front end, the widget view gets that in the front end, and it tells the cell, hey, my output area should be pushed onto the output area stack, and then when the cell gets normal output stuff, it checks the stack first and tries to use the output area on the top of the stack.
Okay. Yeah, what do people think? I'm torn.
I think the comm message approach is probably better in the long term, but if it's not doable for 3.0, I would either I would try the little hack if it really is a little hack. Where would this go?
This little hack would go in code cell around any references to active output area, which is a property that does that stack check. And
okay, so when you say get output area, it would actually give you a promise? Or something, yeah. Get active output area would give you a promise, and then you do then?
Yeah, something like that, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
I would be inclined to, if we can't get the re-implementation of this in the kernel side ready for 3.0, I would be inclined to pull it, actually.
Yeah,
I think
instead of the hack.
Yeah, I'm just...
If we put the widget out there,
adding another async thing when less than everything is async is likely to introduce new race conditions, even if it solves.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Historically, that is...
Other kernel authors to start implementing output widget one way, and then they're going to have to completely re-implement it.
Yeah. But I think probably every widget implementation is going to have to completely change next year. Yeah.
No, I agree with that assessment.
Okay, so do you want to look at how complicated it's going to be to do the other implementation? And if it seems like it's going to take you a while, just say, let's pull that output widget.
Yeah. I think what I'll do is I'll just whip it up real quick, and then if it seems buggy, then we won't use it. I think that's the indicator, because I don't want to have something that,
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks for battling the horse.
Riding the horse.
And actually, related, so John, we had talked about getting rid of the pop-out widget for 3.0.
Yes. Yeah.
We did that.
That's gone.
Okay, it is gone. I just didn't remember the state of that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Jess, do you want to update us on NB Grader and the Jupyter Hub stuff?
We don't yet
I
have
think she's
audio
frozen.
in the
I don't hear
It looks like she's frozen.
We're not hearing you.
Oh,
I can see
Oh, no,
her
she's moving.
but
She's
just
moving.
can't hear her talking.
She's smiling.
Programmers should be seen and not heard.
So while she debugs that, Kyle,
Hi.
yeah, no Mike. Did you see this Kickstarter campaign to create a notebook-based course on computer vision?
No, I haven't seen this.
So Andrew Otawan tweeted it today, and it's basically a course on computer vision using IPython notebooks. They kickstarted it, and it was funded almost instantly on Kickstarter. And one of the interesting things is that the person doing this is promising to have a cloud-based IPython notebook deployment for this.
Oh,
And so I figured, if Andrew knew about it, he may already be planning to use TempNB, but I figured you might want to touch base with this guy.
I mean, it's either that or Jupyter Hub, so.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I guess I'll have to pay attention to Twitter again.
Computer vision Kickstarter. Let me see if I can find the link for you.
15,000 pledged of $2,500 gold.
Yeah. Here, I'll paste. Yeah, I pasted it into the hackpad.
Is the mic working now?
Yep.
Yay!
Yay.
Yay! Are you guys talking about something else?
Oh, we were just
While we're waiting,
yeah. So
go for it.
take it away.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give like a quick update on the class and stuff. So classes start today. We're releasing the problem set on Thursday. We have the whole setup working. We have one server that's running Jupyter Hub and NFS, so files, and then we have a few other servers that the Jupyter Hub server will launch Docker containers on these other servers so that there is proper load balancing for the whole 200 students in the class. And everything seems to be working, though, I mean, we haven't tested it live with 200 people yet, but yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much there and pretty much ready, so I'm really excited about it. Min and Kyle have both been helping and have been super helpful on this. So we'll see how it goes on Thursday. But
So you're mounting NFS home directories inside the Docker containers for each of the users?
yeah.
Okay. And did you is this running on a UC Berkeley domain or?
No, it's on it's compmodels.tempnb.org is the domain.
Okay. Gotcha. So you're not having to deal with any of the SSL certs at UC Berkeley or stuff like that?
No. Yeah. I mean, eventually, probably the next time the course is taught, we'll have to deal with that, but one step at a time. So the other thing is we didn't get CalNet authentication going. That was something I wanted to try to do, but I just ran out of time to do it. So we're just letting them create GitHub accounts, but that's fine.
Yeah. No, this is something I'm starting to work through right now, and that is the unique combination at a university of running an SSL-based website where the backend taps into the university's main authentication. That definitely raises attention and lots of questions.
Yeah.
And so I'm just starting to go through that. I'm teaching 2 sections of computational physics starting in April, so I'm trailing you by a number of months now. How has your final NB or NB grader setup ended up looking like?
So NB grader is installed in the student Docker containers, but the only thing that they're using that for is, so I added a couple of commands to NBGrader. One is NBGrader validate, and one is NBGrader submit. Validate basically is just like the autograder, but it just prints out a message saying like, warning, like these cells failed in this notebook. Like if you submit your notebook, you're not going to get full credit. Great. So that means that sort of gets around the issue of like, even though they have the test cells in their notebook, if they don't run the whole notebook in order, they might miss the fact that like the cells aren't passing. Yeah. And then NBGrader submit just takes the directory that it's running and like puts it in a tarball and then copies it to like a different folder in their home directory. And because this is all like on NFS, I can just like go through all their home directories easily and pull out that tarball, download it to the place that we're going to be doing grading. I also added in just yesterday a feature to ensure that people aren't changing the test cells. So, right, because you could have, someone could just like remove all of the lines in a test cell or comment them out, and then the test cell doesn't throw an error, so they get full credit. But you don't want them to be able to do that. So you can optionally run NBGrader and tell it to record the contents of the cell and store it in a database. So that when you collect the assignments and rerun them, it can check if the contents of the cell changed or not, and override it if it did. And it also will, it now just always does this, will compute a checksum of the cell contents, and when you run NBGrader validate, if you've changed the test cell, it'll warn you that that's happened. So,
gotcha.
Like if students accidentally, like I can understand students wanting to like comment stuff out like while they're debugging and change things like that. That's totally reasonable for them to want to do, but if they then forget to change it back, they might not realize that like they're actually like not gonna, they might not get full credit on that unless they remember to change it back.
Yeah.
So
what's the remind me of the status of IPython master with respect to the metadata fields for preventing cell modification?
So there's the functionality is there to prevent cell deletion, but not like there's, as far as I'm aware, there's no way to make cells read-only. There's no UI for the cell deletion, which there probably should be, but I think it's probably okay for right now. I think I'm the only one that's using it. So.
But if that metadata field is set, the notebook UI won't let you delete the cell.
Right. It just won't tell you anything.
Okay. That's fine. That's a good, a reasonable start.
Yeah, I think we'll just tell the students like we've disabled cell deletion, so if you try to delete a cell, it won't work. But you won't get a notification about it. Just won't work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is really exciting. I look forward to hearing how it goes, and both on the deployment aspects and scaling, and then also the NBGrader sort of the pedagogical workflow for all of that. So. Yeah,
me too. I mean, like a year ago when I was like, oh man, wouldn't it be great if we taught this course in Python? I would not have predicted that we'd have like something this sophisticated and awesome setup only a year later. So I'm super excited to see how this works too.
And if you can give a talk about it at SciPy, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Cool.
I think the really cool part about it too is that you got it all working with Swarm.
Oh yeah. So Swarm is this thing that lets you, I mean, it's basically like a cluster manager for Docker. So you start up a Swarm daemon, and then you connect to the Docker host through the Swarm daemon, and then when you start up a Docker container, the Swarm daemon will figure out like which of your different nodes, different servers to actually start the container on and stuff. So like you don't have to do anything complicated to actually get it to work on multiple systems. You just need to have Swarm running.
Wow.
Yeah, so like it's at the state now, Brian, where you just add more hosts and like add them to the swarm, and then new users would get like put onto those systems.
Yeah.
So if we deploy a new one, run the Ansible scripts, then more resources for the cluster, more resources for the cluster, up until Jupyter Hub itself and the config proxy break.
This is very, very cool. I mean that's.
The one drawback to Swarm is that it's like very, very new. It was only released in December, and it's still like in beta. But
edge course development.
Well, technically, we haven't released Jupyter Hub yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, unlike Jupyter Hub and TempNB, which is completely stable release.
And so like the default strategy that they have isn't exactly the strategy that I want. There's a pull request I have open for the scheduling strategy that I do want. So, that probably won't end up getting merged before Thursday, but I can just
run on the branch. It's fine.
This is that's
there's no such thing as too bleeding when you're on the bleeding edge.
Yeah.
No, this originally I wasn't thinking about using Docker on our deployment for the courses in the spring, but we do have a cluster of 6 hosts, and honestly, it sounds like this may make all of that easier to manage, and so I may end up just using a lot of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found working with Docker to be really nice. I mean, it makes managing all of the processes so much easier, and like cleaning up after them and stuff, and you get a lot of tools on top of it for free, essentially. So
are you how are you managing installation, or how are you managing Python packages and all that?
I'm using a Docker image that's just based off of the IPython SciPy stack Docker image, which includes all of the packages we need except MBGrader, and so then like my image just pip installs MBGrader, and then that's it. So.
Okay, sweet. All right, this is, I mean, I think the long-term impact of this is it's unimaginable. I mean, if we can get it to where other universities can start to deploy this type of thing, it's huge. And so this is just, I don't know, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I'm so excited about it. And I have the Git repository that I linked to is the Ansible deployment. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that's like specific to how I've done it, but I think, spending like a few days like making it more general and configurable should be possible for other people to take that and run with it too. So, once the term settles down a bit, I'll take a few days to do that so that other people can start using it as well.
Wow. No, this is, great work, everyone.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and thanks Amin and Kyle so much for their help with all of this too.
Thanks for being a guinea pig with 200 other guinea pigs.
Yeah, this is
guinea pig in chief.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
So anything else on that? Looks like she froze. Oh, no, nothing more. Okay. How, just a quick bird's eye view of 3.0 questions. Let's see, so we have 40 open issues targeted at 3.0 and maybe some
We've
new
closed
ones.
like 60 since last Tuesday.
And, okay.
I think there's a lot of docs.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of docs. Min, what would you think in terms of a rough guess on an initial alpha beta process starting?
If we allow ourselves to continue to write docs after the first pre-release, I don't know, maybe the end of next week.
Okay.
Reasonable. Maybe not guaranteed, but reasonable.
Okay. Yeah, I think that sounds good. All right. Anything else? That's all we have on the agenda?
Okay.
Well, if not, everyone have a fantastic day, and see you all next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, Internet.
Bye-bye.
Bye.